This lesson has been developed in the framework of SCILED project. Module 2, Footwear Sustainability. Unit 3, Materials and Technologies for Sustainable Footwear Manufacturing.
Lecture 3.2, Chemical Risks of Footwear Materials. This lesson is structured as following.
REACH regulation. CAD's list of restricted substances in footwear. Footwear critical substances.
REACH regulation.
REACH aims to improve the protection of human health and the environment through the better and earlier identification of the intrinsic properties of chemical substances. This is done by the four processes of REACH: the registration, evaluation, authorization and restriction of chemicals. REACH also aims to enhance innovation and competitiveness of the EU chemicals industry. No data, no market. The REACH regulation places responsibility on industry to manage the risks from chemicals and to provide safety information on the substances.
Manufacturers and importers are required to gather information on the properties of chemical substances, which will allow their safe handling, and to register the information in a central database of the European Chemicals Agency, ECHA, in Helsinki. The agency is the central point in the REACH system. It manages the databases necessary to operate the system, coordinates the in-depth evaluation of suspicious chemicals, and is building up a public database in which consumers and professionals can find hazard information. The regulation also calls for the progressive substitution of the most dangerous chemicals, referred as substances of very high concern, when suitable alternatives have been identified.
One of the main reasons for developing and adopting the REACH regulation was that a large number of substances have been manufactured and placed on the market in Europe for many years, sometimes in very high amounts, and yet there is insufficient information on the hazards that they pose to human health and the environment. There is a need to fill these information gaps to ensure that industry is able to assess hazards and risks of the substances, and to identify and implement the risk management measures to protect humans and the environment. Having entered into force in 2007, REACH provisions are being phased in over 11 years. Companies can find explanations of REACH on the internal market, industry, entrepreneurship and SMEs or HA websites, and can contact national help desks.
Restricted list.
The Annex 17 of REACH regulation contains the list of restrictions of certain hazardous substances, mixtures and articles for their marketing and use on the European market. A restriction can apply to any substance on its own, in a mixture or in an article, including those that do not require registration. The list is often known as REACH Restricted Substances List or simply as REACH Annex 17. Reminder: since Switzerland is not a member of the EU or the European Economic Area, EEA, EU REACH regulation does not apply. Switzerland has its own restriction list. The list of restrictions includes all the restrictions adopted in the framework of REACH and the previous legislation, Directive 76/769 EEC. Each entry shows the substance or group of substances or the mixture, and the consequent restrictions conditions. The latest consolidated version of REACH presents the restrictions adopted until that date. Subsequent changes are included in the amending Commission regulations. The restricted substances on their own, in a mixture or in an article, are substances for which manufacture, placing on the market or use is limited or banned in the European Union. The restricted substance table has been prepared by the European Chemicals Agency, ECHA, to facilitate the searching of restricted substances in the Annex 17 of the REACH regulation.
The Annex 17 of REACH regulation contains the list of restrictions of certain hazardous substances, mixtures and articles for their marketing and use on the European market. A restriction can apply to any substance on its own, in a mixture or in an article, including those that do not require registration. The list is often known as REACH Restricted Substances List or simply as REACH Annex 17. Reminder: since Switzerland is not a member of the EU or the European Economic Area, EEA, EU REACH regulation does not apply. Switzerland has its own restriction list. The list of restrictions includes all the restrictions adopted in the framework of REACH and the previous legislation, Directive 76/769 EEC. Each entry shows the substance or group of substances or the mixture, and the consequent restrictions conditions. The latest consolidated version of REACH presents the restrictions adopted until that date. Subsequent changes are included in the amending Commission regulations. The restricted substances on their own, in a mixture or in an article, are substances for which manufacture, placing on the market or use is limited or banned in the European Union. The restricted substance table has been prepared by the European Chemicals Agency, ECHA, to facilitate the searching of restricted substances in the Annex 17 of the REACH regulation.
The table contains EC and CAS numbers. Please note that not all the entries in Annex 17 of the REACH regulation have these numbers. Consolidated text, page of the entry in the latest updated consolidated version of Annex 17 to REACH regulation. Appendices, links to appendices concerning certain restricted substances. Please note that searching with CAS or EC numbers is not yet possible for substances restricted under Appendices 1 to 6, CMR substances. New amendments, EU regulation, the subsequent amendments of REACH regulation after the latest consolidated version, Q&A, the relevant questions from the latest updated QA document and FAQ on HA's website. Standards, links providing information on standards, where available, links to the CAN search engine for the European standards, or to the international standards pages.
Currently there are 69 valid entries on REACH Annex 17. Each entry shows the substance or group of substances or the mixture, and the consequent restrictions conditions. Please note that some entries, for example, 33, 39 and 42, have been deleted due to REACH updates and they are no longer valid. The example in this table is entry 61 for dimethyl fumarate and entry 48 for toluene in REACH Annex 17 restricted substances list.
Candidate list was published by the HA in accordance with Article 5910 of the REACH regulation. It contains some substances very high concern, SVHC. These substances are object of special evaluation by the HA. Information regarding the candidate list can be found on the website of HA. In the framework of REACH, companies related to footwear and components for footwear industry can assume simultaneously several roles: downstream user, importer or manufacturer. For each of these roles different obligations are associated, so the first step should be the definition of company role. The producers of goods, footwear, leather, soles, and textiles, should ensure that their products do not contain substances that cause very high concern and concentrations higher than 0.1% in mass. Producers and suppliers of articles are obliged to transmit to the beneficiary of the articles the information to enable safe use of articles. This obligation is only applied in the case of articles containing substances of very high concern in a concentration above 0.1% in weight. In view of the obligations under REACH is necessary exchange of information along the downstream supply chain, from supplier to customer, and upstream, from client to supplier. All supply chain actors should compile and keep available all the information required to comply with the obligations under REACH for at least 10 years after the date of manufacturing, importing, supplying or used for the last time the substance or preparation. Companies should require the raw materials safety data sheet to guarantee the compliance with legislation. Another option to inform the suppliers of REACH requirements could be the signature of a conformity declaration.
The candidate list of substances of very high concern, also referred as SVHCs, for authorization now contains 201 substances. On July 16, 2019, in Helsinki, HA has added 4 new substances to the candidate list due to their toxicity to reproduction, endocrine disruption and a combination of other properties of concern. The latter causes probable serious effects to human health and the environment, giving rise to an equivalent level of concern to carcinogenic, mutagenic and reprotoxic, persistent, bioaccumulative and toxic, also referred as PBT, and very persistent and very bioaccumulative substances, respectively. The decision to include 2 of the substances, number 2 and 3 in the table, was taken with the involvement of the Member State Committee, also referred as MSC. One further substance, the last in the table, has been added to the list having been identified as an SVHC by the European Commission due to its endocrine disrupting properties. The MSC referred this SVHC proposal to the Commission in 2016. CADS.
CADS, short name for Cooperation at DSI, deals with the subject of hazardous substances in shoes and actively seeks to prevent their use. The association's objectives are the generation and dissemination of knowledge for manufacturing and marketing shoes and shoe materials without hazardous substances as well as for environmentally compatible production.
The main activities are:
pool and forward knowledge about hazardous substances as well as current and future statutory regulations, develop prevention strategies and actively implement consumer protection, run a public awareness campaign, commission scientific research for analyzing the potential hazards of substances used in shoes, develop replacement substances and processes or commission their development, prepare and publish studies about hazardous substances, promote theses and dissertations that deal with hazardous substances in shoes and their prevention, implement measures suitable for manufacturing and marketing environmentally compatible shoes without hazardous substances.
CADS.
CADS integrates a group substances, Group 1, regulated by law, considering only European limits, and critical substances, Group 2. The group of substances considered by CADS are azo dyes, biocide, chlorinated phenols, dyestuffs classified as allergens, dyestuffs classified as carcinogenic, heavy metals, organic tin compounds, other chemicals residues, other phenols, phthalates, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, REACH, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, EPA, volatile organic compounds. And the group of materials considered by CADS are leather, coated leather, leather fiberboard, PVC, EVA foam, rubber materials latex, PU, TPU, DPE TPR, blown materials, foam, synth, textile, coated textile, PU coating DMFA-free natural textile, textiles with applications, wood, cork, cellulose material, adhesive, process chemicals, metallic hardware. The technical report ISO TR 16178, Footwear Critical Substances Potentially Present in Footwear and Footwear Components, establishes a list of critical chemical substances present in footwear and footwear components, their potential risks, the materials where they could be found and the test methods that can be used for quantification. This technical report does not include the requirements. There are 5 categories of critical substances, namely, Critical Substances Category 1, which are the substances with proven dangerous effect on the wearer. These substances are restricted by regulation at European level. Critical Substances Category 2, substances with dangerous effect on the wearer. These substances are restricted by regulation at national level in some countries. Critical Substances Category 3, substances with environmental impact. These substances are mentioned in European Ecolabel. Critical Substances Category 4, substances that are highly suspected to have no effect on the wearer. Possibly, these substances are not restricted by regulation at the time of publication of this technical report. Critical Substances Category 5, substances that are suspected to have an effect on the wearer. In the Annex 1 are defined critical substances that should be tested in footwear material.
In Annex 1 of ISO TR 16178, the critical substances that should be tested in footwear material are defined. These tables include materials in which they might be found, the list of the critical chemicals, test methods which can be used to identify and quantify them, the potential risk associated with and the assessed by the use of the critical substances category scale. Follow the course notes of this lecture to find the tables with critical substances in footwear.